Hello to all the tech enthusiasts, Java and Ruby, Java and Spring Boot developers. First, could you please acknowledge if I am audible once on the chat? If I am audible, could you please acknowledge on the chat? Great, great, great. Thank you so much, guys, for the acknowledgement. First of all, since it is very first session, I would like to welcome you all to my session as well as to my channel Najafi Code. It is because of your passion, your interest in this channel, in me on me to teach you Java and Spring Boot got me here. Fine. So I'm really happy to be here to teach you all Java and Spring Boot, and I'm very much coming first time live on my own channel. I've been on the YouTube in different channels, but not on my own channel. Fine. So before we kickstart the journey, before we get into what we are going to discuss, let me tell you this entire Spring Boot series will be for 2 long months, probably 4 sessions every week. And also, it depends on your interest. If you keep on watching the sessions, if you keep on attending the live sessions, definitely I will also be motivated and also be in a position to teach you almost all the concept of Spring Boot. And not just Spring Boot and Java. I have a plan of uploading the video tutorials on the concept of DevOps, on the concept of cloud, data structures, and algorithm. Many topics are planned, and Spring Boot happens to be the first topic which I'm bringing in front of you on my YouTube channel in the form of live sessions. Apart from that, there will be recorded video tutorials also, and of course I'll be coming live also for some other topics apart from Java and Spring Boot. And good to see the comments which you have given. That really motivated me. Before even I started something on my channel, the way you have commented, the way you have given the comments, it really motivates me to do well on my journey. Now, what is expected out of these sessions? What we are going to discuss? Everything I'll be presenting you in front of you. So let me just present my screen. So as all of you know that in these live sessions we are going to have series of Spring Boot lectures. As you can see, with respect to the topic name itself, we are going to have the series of Spring Boot lecture. Now, who are the target audience? How am I going to teach these concepts? All of that I'm going to discuss here. Before we get started with the actual discussion on Spring Framework or Spring Boot, those who have not yet subscribed, please do subscribe, hit the subscribe button, and also hit the notification bell so that you'll not miss any of the video tutorials, any of the live sessions which are going to come from this particular channel. As I have mentioned already, it's not just about Java or Spring Boot, it's more than Java or Spring Boot. Anything related to the IT industry, other programming languages also. I have a plan to coming up with the live session as well as the recorded session. Now, I'll be teaching in English, and as I'm speaking right now, I hope you are aware that I'm not going to use any hi-fi terms. And even if you know the basics of English, you will be in a position to understand. I'm not going to use any of the English terms. I don't want to show here English skills. As you can notice, my English is also not that great, but still it is manageable for me to speak and also for you guys to listen and understand the concept. Fine. And I know if you have already learned from me, you know very well, I'll try to keep the things as simple as possible. And here also in this free Spring Boot course, in this Spring Boot live sessions, I'll try to simplify all the concepts related to Spring Boot in the simplest possible way. Fine. Now, in order to understand this Spring Boot, Spring framework, As you all know, it is one of the trending framework for the application development. Anyone who would like to develop the applications, distributed applications, complex applications, scalable application, most of the companies prefer Java. And if they are preferring Java, then they will definitely use the framework which is associated with Java, which happens to be Spring Boot. So if you want to get into industry as a Java developer, as a software developer or software engineer in general, you must know Spring Boot and microservices along with Java. There were days back then that knowing one programming language or knowing Java was sufficient, but in this current era, not just knowing one programming language, more than that is required. You must be knowing at least how to develop an application. And one of the most popular trending application and the trending framework is Spring Boot, which we are going to cover. Now, I know all the questions you are asking, what is the prerequisites? Definitely I'll be mentioning that. To start with, since Java, no, Spring Boot happens to be the framework of Java, it is based on Java. You must be knowing Java. You must be knowing Java. If you don't know Java, whatever code we are going to write, while understanding the concept which are associated with Spring framework, you will not be in a position to get the clarity. If you are not in master, if you're not having very good grip of Java, that's fine, but at least you must have developed some of the applications using core Java, basic console based applications. You know the core concepts of Java, all the oops concepts, collections basic. Then it is good to go ahead with these sessions. If not, you can first learn the Java, then continue here. Fine. So you should be knowing Java. Second thing, if it is good to have thing, advanced part of Java, I'm referring to advanced Java, I'm referring to concept related to JEE. That means concept which are related to servlets, and JDBC. Now, the question arises here. Many of you might not aware of this servlets and JDBC, might have not encountered. No problem. Even without these concepts, you will be in a position to understand Spring Boot, Spring. But if you want to get a complete clarity, example, when we get into the concept of Spring Web MVC, we are going to talk about dispatcher servlets and other things. There, to have a good grip of that particular concept, it is required that you may know some part of servlets. I don't want you to be a pro in servlets or JDBC concept. Of course, it's good to have if you know JSP to develop the web pages. It's good to have, not mandatory. Now, don't take this as like an excuse. Maybe I have not watched servlets, I'm not aware of this particular concept. Should I stop learning Spring Boot? No. Maybe in your free time after this session, somewhere 1 or 2, 3, 4 hours, maybe just to develop 1 or 2 basic application of servlet, just to understand how it works. It will be good, and you'll have a complete idea about Spring framework. You'll appreciate Spring framework if you have some knowledge on this. But the mandatory knowledge is Java. If not true, at least you should know how to work with Java. At least you should have written some of the programs of Java. If you know these things, it is advisable, again, good to have SQL knowledge. These days, irrespective of domain you are in, even if you are an automation tester, even if you are a backend developer, even if you are into data field, data engineering, data science, AI, ML, there also SQL is needed. But in the data field, you should master the SQL. But when it comes to the development, backend development, you'll not be much working directly with SQL and databases. You should be knowing fundamentals, maybe DML and DDL commands, basic query writing. If you have, it's good to have. It will be easy for you to understand some of the concepts. If not, there are so many YouTube tutorials are available on the concept of SQL. I'm also going to come in future. Basics, fundamentals. What is RDBMS? What is database? How do we write some of the queries? If you, even if you know how to perform basic CRUD operations, it is sufficient. It's good to have skills. Again, I'm not telling that it's like mandatory, but if you have these two added, it will be like added advantages for you to get the complete knowledge of Spring framework, which is again in demand and one of the trending, a framework to learn at this particular time. Now, great. Great. Thank you so much for all these comments. Now, I hope you got to know about the prerequisites. Who are the target audience? Yes. By chance, if you don't know any of these things, please try to learn that and then come. Whenever you have, on option, whenever you have something strange in front of you, a technology when you're trying to learn, you have two options. Number one, ignore it, get scared of this. Number two, learn it. The simplest approach is just to learn it. If you don't do anything, that's absolutely fine. You have a solution. What is the solution? Learn it. Fine. Now, let's get started. How are we going to discuss this Spring framework here? There are many of the learners on this channel who already know me. They know me very well. By chance, if someone doesn't know me, my name is Hyder Abbas. I'm one of the passionate developer as well as the educator in the tech world. I've been developing, also teaching Java, Spring Boot, and related technologies from almost more than 5 years. Total, I have professional experience of 7 to 8 years, and I've been teaching Java and Spring Boot for more than 5 years. And for the first time, I'm coming up with the free course on my own channel. By chance, if you don't know me. Now, how are we going to discuss? As I have mentioned, there are many on this channel who knows me already and who have learned Java as well as the Spring fundamentals also. And they have messaged me many a times that please teach Spring REST, please teach Spring security, Spring Web MVC directly. I'll not be getting into that because I'm going to start here from absolute scratch. Fine. Even if you know the fundamentals of Spring, until I reach to the advanced concept, please have patience and also learn simultaneously. There is no harm in relearning the things which you already know. Fine. So I'm going to start from absolute scratch. It is the beginner friendly. Of course, these prerequisites are there. I'm talking when it comes to Spring framework. When it comes to the Spring framework, I'm going to start from absolute scratch. Fine. And I'll not be teaching much of the history here, basic fundamental features which you should be knowing it before we kickstart the journey of Spring. That I'll be covering it, and then one by one, concept by concept, module by module, we will be exploring the entire Spring framework. Fine. All the current trending things, and also I'll be mentioning about the industry practices which you have to follow if you are a Spring Boot developer. What is expected from the industry? All of that also I'm going to mention, and also I'll be bringing the perspective of interview also. Some of the concepts, if I am discussing, then definitely I'll also be discussing from the point of interview, also from the point of industry exposure, that once you know this concept, how you are going to implement there, and also in from the perspective of interview, what all things you must know. Fine. Great. Great. Now, in a week, 4 sessions I'll try to take, unless if there are any technical issues, then definitely, uh, we may have to drop 1 or 2 sessions. As long as you guys are supporting me, I'll be taking up these live sessions continuously, unless and until you guys keep supporting me. Fine. Now, this class will also be available on this YouTube channel once the live session is over. Now, even if you know the basic core Java, you'll be acknowledging with this point that if you know Java, you can you can develop only console-based applications. Fine. Command line interface application. In short, if I have to say, command line interface, which once you no run the program, you'll be getting something on the console. If you know the JEE part, and if you know the JDBC using which you can establish connection to the database, you will be in a position to establish the connection to the database. In order to do that, we use JDBC concept to perform DB related operation. If you want to store that information which you have in your application onto the DBMS, that's where we go with the concept of JDBC. If you know more than that, maybe the servlet, then you can develop the web applications. You can develop web applications in Java, and this have been used in the industry for quite a long time. Even today, it's not completely outdated. Even if you're learning, if you have been hired by some company, they may expect you to work on servlet also. It's not completely, been, out of the industry. That's not the case here. Still, it's being used. There are some of my friends who are into IT industry or working in different companies. They still use servlet, so it's not completely outdated. Fine. So even otherwise, currently, even if it is not being used, even if you want to have a complete idea of Spring, as I've mentioned already, you should be knowing at least minimal fundamentals of servlets, which is a good to have. Fine. And JSP, you might have heard, it is usually we do use for the web pages to develop the view part web pages. And also whatever you are doing in servlet, you can also do in the JSP. Maybe if you want to develop a web application and you're not much aware of the Java syntax, you're not so much comfortable with Java, is there an alternative? You can use JSP. There are many tags there, directive tags, declarative tags, using which you can perform all the operations. It has the ability what servlet can do, but it's very rare that someone can use JSP for web application development. Not possible. Basically, generally, we use for the web pages. Fine, especially if you're learning the back-end technology and if you're not well aware about the front-end part. And just to demonstrate our end result, whatever we are developing at the back end, just to demonstrate the end result, we use JSP just to show some of the view pages. Is that fine? Even if you know the basics of HTML, whatever is required for our course, that much you'll be in a position to understand it. Now, what is no Spring now? These things is not currently extensively being used in the industry. I'm telling it is not outdated, but it is not also being used also. No new project is starting using these technologies. They are old. Unless if you have to work in some of the old projects, you will be working in these technologies. Or if you want to master some advanced framework, just to know the fundamentals, you will be knowing these concepts. But if you get hired and if your company started to work on Java or development, you'll not be working in any of this JDBC, servlets, and JSP. It's just good to have things. Now, then, what is Spring Framework? What is Spring Framework? Before we discuss what is Spring Framework, you know what is framework first of all? What do you mean by this framework? It's something I can say in simple terms. Maybe if I'm not wrong, you can say semi-developed software or semi-developed application where few things are readily available for you. If you use any of these technologies from the scratch, each and everything, all the configuration, all the dependencies you have to manage as a developer. Everything is on your head. But instead of these direct technologies, if you go with the framework, then there is an advantage over these technologies. What is that? Few things will be readily available on you. You need not to put lot of efforts. Mostly I could say 20, 30 or 40% of your work will be done by this framework itself. Your efforts are less and you can increase your productivity. For an instance, if you want to work with JDBC, if you want to work with JDBC. Yeah, you can, Pratik. Definitely you can. Uh, but good to have these technologies, not mandatory, as I have mentioned at the beginning itself. So when it comes to JDBC, even if you know the basics, if you don't know the basic, still you can listen to this very carefully. What is that I'm trying to say is, if you want to connect the Java application to this JDBC, to a database, and perform the Java's database connectivity, perform the DB related operation, then few things are common. What are those things? If you ask me, you have to first load the driver. You have to first load the driver. Second thing, you have to get the connection. Number third, you have to. Number three, you have to create a statement. Create a statement. Then you have to execute your query. And here is where you will be doing the actual work. If you are storing the data, if you are creating the table, if you are getting the data, here is where you're doing. Finally, you will be closing the connection. Now, if you are working on JDBC, irrespective of your location, irrespective of your region, irrespective of the project you are working on, maybe you are in Australia, maybe you are in Canada, US, UK, India, wherever you are from, in whichever company you are working on whichever project you are working on, you have to, must and should follow these steps only. There is no other shortcut. So is it something like repetitive task? Everyone has to do it. And in simple terms, in tech terms, we can call this as boilerplate code. Even if you're working, maybe some of my friends working in Oracle, some of them are working in Google, one in the Canada, in some other startup, and someone in the USA. If they are working with JDBC, one thing is common. They have to follow these steps. Loading the driver, then establishing the connection, creating the statement, then you are executing the query, closing the connection. This is something similar thing. And in place of this JDBC technology, if you use any of the framework in place of these things as an alternative framework, you no need to do these things. Maybe whatever you're doing with JDBC in 7 to 8 statements, if you're using the framework, you can do this in one statement, only one statement or two statements. Half of your work is reduced. Fine. So some of the common things which are there to develop application, those things will be taken care by whom? Framework. As a developer, you need not to worry on those things. Your duty is just to follow the structure. There will be way to follow whenever you're using the framework. That's it. All the things framework will be taken care, and you can be more productive in this. Fine, my dear friends. Of course, Explore Adi has been telling me to take in the English. I think I'm not using any of the hi-fi terms. There is some of the international candidates also. I'm going to use simple English terms. My English is also not so good. So you will be in a position to understand whatever I'm telling, provided you are focused to this. And I want every one of you to be finisher. You are attending, you must complete the entire spring series, which is going to come on this channel, that too live interactive. Fine. It will not cause, Anish Gopal, will that not cause any problem in jobs or interview if you can't implement without framework? There is no problem, but if you're working in a project, there will be 50, 100, 200, 300 developers. If all of them are following something, you cannot be exclusive and you follow something else. It will be difficult. You have to go with this. You have to adjust and need not to worry. The situation will make you to learn the things. But anyway, have you understood the meaning of framework? Can you please acknowledge this? Have you all understood the meaning of framework in general? It will just increase your productivity, reduce says the efforts which is required for a developer. Right. Now, when it comes to frameworks also, usually we have ORM framework, we have web framework when it comes to Java. When you talk about the ORM framework, when you talk about the ORM framework, we have Hibernate, object relational mapping. When it comes to the web, earlier back then we had one famous framework called as Struts framework, which is currently outdated. When I also started my career back then, one of the project I had to work on this Struts, which is quite difficult. I could not get, and there was no motivation. When you try to do it, people in the tech, all of them used to say that it's outdated. What's the point of learning that? But there was a project which demanded I had to learn, but it's outdated. It's a web framework. It's an ORM framework, which is related to develop the persistence layer. That means about the latency part. Fine. Now, what is the Spring then? Is it a ORM framework or is it a web framework? What is that then? My dear friends, Spring is such a framework using which you can develop an application. Application in sense, I'm talking about end-to-end application. End-to-end application. Of course, when I say end-to-end part of your application, I'm not referring to the front-end part. You may go that, okay, can we develop the UI part, the view part also using the Spring? No, it's not possible. Backend. For an instance, Hibernate, you cannot develop the web part. You cannot handle a request. You cannot write the service. Usually we use only for the ORM purpose. Struts we usually only use to handle the request. To handle the request also, servlet takes so many boilerplate code. Get parameter. Irrespective of the technology you use, you have to follow that. So only we have struts. But Hibernate, using Hibernate, everything you can manage. End-to-end development. It has so many, it's the umbrella of so many other modules, other sub frameworks. What do you mean by that? I'm going to talk here. Please hear. If you develop an application, any web application which you have come across, there will be UI layer in that. View part, what the end user can see. What an end user can see. They'll be entering our website, whatever they see. End user, that is a UI layer. Apart from that, there are many other layers also. One, generally, we will have different approaches are there. I'm going to talk about that. Web layer. Then we will have generally the business logic, or I can say service layer, where you write actual business logic. I'm going to do this from the scratch. If you have know these things, have little patience because we are going to cover many things here. Fine. And of course, we will be having oops. Let me just implement this. Yeah. Service layer, or you can say business layer, where you write actual business logic. Then we also have the actual database or persistence layer. In short, you can call that as, maybe I can call this as persistence layer. See, fine. And this is our actual database. At the end, you are going to store all your data here. Whichever application you see these days, don't you think they are collecting your data? At the end, every application you go, the pop-up will come. Whichever application these days you go, they are collecting your data. They are going to store somewhere in the database. For that also, there is a layer. There is a way of going towards the development. Yes, this recording also will be available. No, Shreyas Jain, as I have mentioned, Spring cannot be used for the front end. End to end, I'm referring to the back end. What is that? You'll get the idea here. Please see very carefully. To whenever user enters something, request, he'll get this, and whatever data he enters here, maybe it is a registration form, that will be taken by a web layer. One of the layer we develop just to manage whatever my user is there, the backend part of the first stage. Request handling, where whenever my user, end user of my application requests something, how can we handle it? All of that usually we develop in the web layer part. Usually we use one technology here called as servlet technology. And if you don't want to use servlet, we can use one framework here, struts, which is outdated. Both of them are also outdated in the industry, but servlet is somewhat still being used, but not so much. You need not to master that. And here we usually use the concept of JDBC, or we have a framework right now, it is still being used in the industry, which is Hibernate. I'm talking with respect to Java. Fine. Different layers are there, but this is belong to, Hibernate we use for the ORM, struts we use for the web layer, just to handle the request and whatever data we have, just to pass it on. But when you use Spring framework, you have a capability. You can develop an end-to-end all the layers of an application. You can develop all the layers of an application using the Spring framework. If you're using the Spring framework, can I develop this? Yes. Can I write the service logic? Yes. Can I write this? Yes. 100% you can do it. That powerful is your Spring framework. It's not like Spring framework first came, the alpha version, 0.9 alpha version of Spring. That came in 2002. Actual first production level 1.0 came in 2004. From that time, it is still trending in the industry. You can imagine. And of course, it is open source. So many people contributed to it. And Spring 2.0, Spring 3.0, 4.0. Currently, Spring 6 is also there. Currently, Spring 6 is also there. They are also evolving as per the need and demand of the industry. It's always updating. And if you know the fundamentally the entire framework, whenever there is any special feature, you will not face any difficulty to learn and upgrade yourself. But here what I'm trying to say is Spring is such a framework using which can I manage this? Yes, you can manage. Can we manage this? Yes, you can develop the business logic. You can develop the REST APIs, RESTful web services. Can we manage this? Yes, we have a Spring DAO, REST or web, Spring MVC. We have a Spring DAO, or some people call it as Spring JDBC. We have many layers. Fine. Is it the only feature that using this we can develop this? No, more than this. Also, one more important point, and you may have this question as a fresher, or if you're new to the world of Spring, that if we use Spring framework, is it like we have to develop all the layers of our application using Spring only? No, that is not the case. Spring is a versatile framework. What do you mean by that? Maybe this part is being developed using the servlet or struts. This part is being developed using the Hibernate or JDBC. And only the service layer you have developed using the string. It's not using the Spring framework, Spring REST. Can we integrate the other layers of our application with Spring? Yes, Spring can gel with other layers, even though they might have been developed by a different technology. Maybe here you're using old frameworks such as struts, or maybe you're using servlet. The database part, the ORM part, you're using Hibernate, or maybe even older than that, JDBC. And only the one part of your application you're using Spring. Can you integrate? Yes, you can integrate. Can I write everything? Yes, you can write. Can I write only one part, the other parts in different technology? Yes. Can you imagine the how powerful the Spring framework is? Yes. What it is trying to solve, everything we are going to discuss. Now you have understood what is framework. Using Spring framework, what all we can do. Let's try to understand these things in a little detailed way. To start with, Spring is a framework. As we have already understood what is the meaning of a framework, I'm going to talk about the controllers, everything here. I'm going to talk about it. We know what is framework. We know how powerful is the Spring framework. Also, I know you have a doubt. What is the difference between Spring and Spring Boot? Are they same? Do we need to here? Are we going to learn Spring or Spring Boot? Everything will be clarified. Need not to worry on that. These are just different terms. Now, please hear with some changes which I'm going to mention here. It first came as the alpha version in the year 2002. And who developed this? A great scientist, Rod Johnson. Then first official version came in 2004. And from there it is being extensively used in the industry. So many versions came. And now it is 6. 2017 it was 5. Now 2022 December it is 6. Minimal changes will be there with respect to the architecture. The agenda will not be different. Now, under the Spring framework umbrella, we have many important things. I can call this as sub frameworks of Spring framework. Fine. Sub, or we can say simple modules also you can say. Because using Spring, you can develop modular application as I have mentioned here. Like whenever you use Spring framework, is it like you have to develop everything of that application using Spring only? No. That is not the case. The first thing which you need to know about it is Spring Core, which is the base of your entire framework. If you don't know Spring Core, you cannot learn Spring Boot, you cannot learn Spring Web MVC, you cannot learn Spring Data JPA, you cannot learn about the Spring REST, Spring Security, nothing. All the other modules are at the top of the Spring Core framework, Spring Core part. This is one of the important part. It talks about two things. Number one, it talks about the inversion of control. It talks about dependency injection. You might have heard these terms, you might have learned it also, but I'm going to show these things practically in a simplest way possible. And I'll make sure that each and every one who are watching this will have 100% end-to-end clarity on the concept of IOC and dependency injection, which is the fundamental of the entire Spring framework. Fine? Yes, believe in yourself if that's your name. Yeah. So we are going to learn this. And then in tomorrow's session only, practically I would demonstrate what is this IOC, what is this dependency injection. Weekly 4 sessions. I'm trying to cover many things here. And I know what to get more on this. You can also do the research. We have a chat GPT, we have a Google with you. I know what is something for which you need not to have any assistance. Those things you can learn by yourself. Whatever concept I feel like you need some guidance, I'll be there. I'll be teaching all those concepts. Exactly. Focus and consistency is the key. Great. So the base of your entire Spring framework is Spring Code, wherein you must know about IOC and dependency injection. All of you agree on this? Yep. I hope all of you are focused, those who are part of this session today. 100%. Great. Of course, in dependency injection, we have setter injection, constructor injection, method injection. So many things we will be seeing. And under this, we will be seeing about bean life cycle, bean factory. We'll be seeing about the wiring, manual wiring, auto wiring, how to do that. And all this Spring fundamental annotations which you must know. If you guys want, I can show you the one program of XML approach, and then I'll show you that how annotations have made programmers' life easy. And using these annotations, how easily you can develop the things. Earlier, we used to have XML approach for everything you had to do, but these days we have annotations. That also I'm going to speak, talk about under the Spring core only. These all things I'm going to cover. Fine, my dear friends. Then we'll see about Spring data JPA. You can call it as JDBC, Spring JDBC. You can call it as Spring DAO. Then we are going to discuss about the concept of Spring Web MVC, wherein we are going to talk about entire MVC architecture. MVC architecture. We are going to talk about all the front controllers. I'm going to talk about the entire architecture of Spring Web MVC, what it follows, entire architecture. Right? We have dispatcher servlet there. We have handler mapper. We have controller. We have view resolver. We have view part. Every component of this entire architecture I'm going to discuss in detail. And all the required annotations. What is the difference between controller annotation, REST controller annotation? All of that also will be taken care. Under this only Spring REST also will be taken care. And rest of the how to develop REST APIs, which you must be knowing it. I'll be covering that. And if you guys be consistent and motivate, subscribe to my channel, share my channel. And if you like it, definitely I'll be motivated. I'll try to cover as many topics as possible. And it's completely how you react, how you respond based on that. But everything from the scratch. And if someone have joined in between, once the live session ends, this video will be available on the YouTube on my channel itself. Please watch from the start itself so that you'll have complete hold of this, whatever we have discussed. No concept is small, no concept is, not so important. Every concept is important. What I'm trying to say here. Fine, my dear friends. So other modules of Spring, it's no point without learning this. Now, Spring Boot is like, we are going to, once basics of Spring Core we cover, we are going to start with Spring Boot only. Rest of all the programs, Spring Boot only. It's like Spring Boot is basically, it's a way of developing Spring based applications easily in simple terms. If I have to use the basic thing, what we do here is auto configuration, the basic feature, the primary feature. And how much ever I say in theoretical way, it will not make much of the sense. Doesn't matter how much I say about the theoretical way, that it is this, it is that. If I show it practically, it will make more sense. I don't want to get more theoretical way in these things, because from tomorrow, once I start to code and explain everything, if you know the nature of my learning, if you are already my student, I try to explain majority of the concept by writing down the code. And I'm going to show the entire series only by writing the code only. Something fundamentals I'm building, because I have promised that it will be from the scratch. If you know all these things, please have patience unless or until we reach to that point. It's like a Spring application in an easy way how to develop. Especially Spring Boot, we develop REST APIs using the Spring Boot only. Yeah. Much of the configurations will be done automatically. Whatever is the requirement, all of that will be taken care implicitly, automatically, without your efforts. What do you mean by that? I'll explain first of all the problems of Spring. Then once we write the Spring Boot program, you will be in a position to understand how different they both are. Fine. Would you like to give any advice for entry level job seekers in current situation? Yes, please focus on the skills. situations will pass, and if you are skilled, there will be doors open to you. Skill, I'm not referring to maybe you have heard somewhere here and there. You should be knowing the concept properly. Every day ask yourself how much knowledge you have added to your portfolio, how much work are you doing. Anyone, how much ever busy you are, 2 to 3 years for your self improvement, you can get it from 24 hours of time. And the more skills you add, skills in sense, I'm telling you should be confident in that skill. It's like, yes, I know this, and things will be normal and you'll be getting the jobs easily. Don't worry on that things, focus on skills, other things will come onto you automatically. There is some hard time, but that is passing. Many openings we could see on the IT industry also. Yeah. Now, anyway, my dear friends, fine guys, all of you, we will be developing both. No, you'll be having the idea, and we are going to develop everything with respect to the annotation approach. If you ask me, I can show one example of XML approach. That means back then, which we used to do it, but once people are addicted to the annotation approach, annotation based development, annotation based development, of course, we will not be going ahead for the XML approach, which is not at all friendly. And we are going to develop here. Yeah. We are going to develop some of the projects and some of the standards which we are going to follow. Fine. Spring Boot, if someone says they are talking about auto configuration. Spring, if someone says only Spring framework, they are talking about inversion of control. Inversion of IOC container we have. They're talking about that. And they're talking about dependency injection. Whenever someone talks, do you know Spring framework? That means they're referring to at least these basic things. Spring Boot, what is the difference? If they say the first thing which should pop up in your mind is auto configuration. What is that? Practically, I'm going to show. Fine. Alongside throughout this entire journey, journey, we will be also following some of the industry standards and design patterns which is required. Of course, there will not be any separate design pattern sessions. Maybe I may come up with, but for a Java developer, while we learn this, we are going to discuss that. Fine. Thank you so much for all this comment, and I have my guide and my mentor also, Zabi sir here. Your comments is always motivating. Motivates me to do well here. Anyway, good to see. All these comments which you have. Now, what is this exactly IOC dependency injection? I'm talking right. It's a base. It is a fundamental. You must know these things. What is that? We are going to learn that practically by writing down the code. First, I'll write the code without using the Spring. Then I'm going to write the code here. Just to demonstrate here, I would like to say, if you follow the layered approach, you'll be developing application in multiple layers. Who has to interact with user separate layer? Who has to interact? One kind of architect, you can say. Database, a separate part. The one service REST APIs you're developing, sending the emails, all these things you'll be developing in between. Fine. Now, generally, if you know Java, you should answer me this. If you have multiple Java files, if you have, maybe I have a Java program here, whose duty is to connect to the database. We have a Java program here whose duty is to write these service layers. We have a Java program here whose duty is to maybe write the presentation or maybe web layer. Maybe there are multiple Java files for everything you have written. Maybe to encrypt password, you have one class by the name password. As you all know that whenever you're developing the application, you should keep your project modular. That means everything separately you should keep. Though there is a possibility that in one class you're writing everything. But that is not all a good approach. Everything, every small activity, write in separate class, separate function, separate methods, so that debugging in future will become very easy if there is any problem in the application. So what I'm trying to say is, if there is any one application, if there is a client requirement which you want to develop, you will be writing for every activity different classes. Fine. I have a question for you. In the service layer, if you want to invoke any of the functionality of password class, what is the approach you do in Java generally? What is that you do in Java generally? We create object. We follow something called as, number one, we follow composition. Composition means, don't get scared with this hi-fi term composition. No. Composition means general, which we have done so far. You create the object of password. You create the object of password. Create object. Using reference, call methods or that activity. This is what we do. We just create the object and call the method. That's what we do here, right? Generally in Java. In Java, basic Java, I'm trying to talk. Or you have one more approach, follow the inheritance. Inheritance. Extend that. Two approaches. Basically, if you are Java developer, new to the world of programming, that's the option we have. And generally, we develop application which is tightly coupled. One class is dependent on the other class. You are creating the object of password here if you want to invoke. Maybe there is something here, some function is there in the web layer, some method is there. In the service layer, you want to call that method. Then what you will do? You create the object of this particular class and then you call that particular method in this, right? That's what you do generally. That's the approach you follow. And even if there is something required here in the DAO layer, you are writing one class, model class, and there is a requirement that some data which is there in this, you want to get that here. You create the object and then using the reference, you get it. So what is happening here? In that process, all your classes are getting dependent on each other. They are getting tightly bonded, coupled with each other. And by chance, if password classes getting deleted, something happened to this class, you are creating the object of password in the service layer is also affected. And something happened here, then this DAO layer also will be affected. Maybe there is a class here, that class got affected. Someone deleted that class. And in this some other layer, you are creating the object of that class. If class is only not there, can you create object? Can you create the object? No. You cannot create object if class is not there. So that part of the code also will be affected. In general, what I'm trying to say is your entire application will be affected. You will get compile time issue there itself. Why this is happening? Because generally we follow the approach of composition or tight coupling. We'll be tightly coupled with one class is dependent on other class is dependent on this. In that way only we generally write programs in Java. And the idea of Spring framework is simply to decouple all these things. Decoupling this to manage all these dependencies. If you are using the Spring framework, then you need not to create the objects. You need not to manage the dependencies which we have between one class to another class. All the dependencies, object creation part, everything will be taken care by IOC container, inversion of control container. Fine. IOC will be taken care, which is one of the core module of your Spring framework. One of the important module, which we will be seeing practically, how that will be done by IOC container. Fine. All of you. This decoupling, that is the basic idea of Spring framework. To decouple the dependencies, to develop loosely coupled applications. How to develop that? What are you trying to show? Can we write that practically? Of course, yes, we are going to do that practically in tomorrow's class. Before we conclude, before I take some of your questions, using Spring framework, can we develop entire backend application? Can we develop entire backend application? Your answer must be yes. It has so many modules, so many modules under it, under the umbrella of Spring, Spring Web MVC, Spring REST, Spring Securities, Spring Core, Spring Data JPA, that is referring to the JDBC part. It is versatile. It is versatile. Can you call Spring as versatile? Yes. What do you mean by that? We have already talked that in the entire approach of Esprit application development, if other layer is developed in some other technology, maybe servlet, Hibernate, one layer is developed using the Spring. Spring can gel with them. Spring can be integrated with other modules and layers which have been developed in some other technology apart from Spring. Spring can be integrated easily. It's versatile. Also, very important, Spring framework, very, very important, never forces you to extend any class or implement any interface. Never forces you. If you know the basics of servlet also, to develop web application, if you use servlet, you have two options. Option number one, class, whatever you give the name, my servlet extends HTTP servlet, or you can write other way, class my servlet implements servlet. You can never develop a servlet application without extending or implementing. This is must and should, wherein Spring never forces you to do that. You can write your own Spring class independently. Maybe I'll write a class here, Najafi code. It will not force you to extend any other class. It will not force you to implement some of the interfaces. And because of it, we call it as non-invasive. Invasive means it will demand you to do something, but it is not. That is one of the major advantages here. You need not to extend or implement any of the interfaces. Fine. So with this note, if you are there from the beginning till last, and if you have joined in between here and there somewhere, I would request you to kindly watch this entire session, maybe in 1.2x speed or 1.5x speed, it's up to you, completely, so that you'll have a complete idea about whatever we have discussed. So with this note, if you are there from the beginning till last, can I say that you have now a generic fundamental idea about the Spring framework? Can I say that all of the learners who are there from the beginning till the end, one generic fundamental basic idea about what is Spring framework you all have? Yes, I'm going to discuss on microservices also. Yes, my dear friends, can you please acknowledge on the chat once? Great, great, great. So thank you so much for joining me today. I know today I have not shown anything practically. I've just spoke about this because this is needed. Directly, I don't want to get into code and trying to explain this. No, that is not my way of teaching. You already know that. These fundamentals were required, though I could have done in 2, 3, 4 hours, which I do in my live sessions. But anyway, with the time frame which we had, I don't want to waste your time. I tried my best to give you a fundamental generic idea about this Spring framework and what is framework in general. And tomorrow onwards, we are going to learn everything practically by writing down the code. Whenever needed, I'll be explaining you in the board approach. I know my handwriting is not so good. I'll try to improve. uh, why doctor should have all the privilege, engineer also should have a privilege to write in this style. And we are tech guys, we will not be bothered, this is not English class at the end of the day. Fine, my dear friends, and tomorrow we are going to discuss the first step into the Spring framework. So what we have understood here, with Java what you can do, with JW what you can do, with Spring what you can do, how powerful it is, what is Spring, how many modules comes under the umbrella of Spring framework, that also we have discussed, and some of the important advantages or features of Spring framework. And also we have seen fundamentally a difference between Spring and Spring Boot. Some words I've used, I did not elaborate because these words you can get from the Google also, Chat GPT also. I would like to show more by writing down the code so that you can feel the actual difference rather than knowing some of the text. Fine. So with this note, I would like to conclude the technical discussion of this first session. Tomorrow, again at same time, 8 p.m. Monday, we are going to continue this session from here only. Please do share my channel with all of your friends. Do subscribe, hit the like button, also hit the hit the like and also hit the bell so that you can get all the notification about my videos and live sessions. The more you support, the more concepts I'll be covering. And of course, this is just the start. Many more things to come going ahead. So thank you so much, guys. To join me today. I could have extended, if you know me personally, if you have attended my courses, I can take 3 4 hours in one stretch. But it's a YouTube, we have diverse audience who may not be able to get it. And of course, these things will be available as a recorded also. So that time also, many may struggle to have 2 3 hours of session in one stretch. By following these things, I would like to stop. And tomorrow I'd like to continue my discussion on Spring Framework. I hope all of you have enjoyed. Tomorrow, 8 p.m., we will be meeting it. So if you have any questions, do ask me. If you have any suggestions or anything you want me to cover, do feel free to tell me on the chat. I'll be taking that. I'll try to address all of them. So, Rennie, if you have any requirement, you can do tell me on the chat. I'll try to cover that. Fine. So tomorrow session, in the first week, usually we'll try to cover about the Spring core. The first 4 or 6 sessions on the Spring on the core only we are going to cover. One, if time permits, on the XML approach as well as on the annotation approach, or only on the annotation. Majority of the course will go on the annotation approach. All right. All right, guys. Good to see this. Thank you so much for joining me again today. Great to know all this that you are enjoying, and I'll be grateful if you continue to attend the live sessions and you will get more knowledge from this particular channel. Thank you so much, guys. 1 hour usually every day we'll try to cover. 1 hour every day we'll try to cover, and from upcoming sessions I'll try to cover practically by writing down the code on almost every topic. And also I'm going to tell about the industry standards, some of the industry design patterns which we follow generally as we go ahead in this particular course. Thank you so much, guys, for joining me today. We'll meet again tomorrow exactly at 8 p.m. Indian Standard Time. Thank you so much, guys.